If you're new here, my name is Michelle Pava. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. And before I begin, I want to just point out that I have a free resource for you. It's in the description below. I want to help you get the love you deserve, feel more affluent, and be happy in your own skin. When you like, when you comment, when you subscribe, that is like oxygen to me, and it helps me to create more videos. Thank you. Today I'm going to tell you 7 ways that you can lift shame so that you can become more prosperous. Shame is actually holding you back from being more prosperous. It's fairly a new thing that poverty is connected with shame. People these days are reluctant to admit that they are struggling or having financial challenges. They might complain about it more as a community or societal issue, but they rarely talk about their own struggles. There's almost a social currency that seems to mean more to people than actual real currency. There is a shame now associated with poverty, and that's a fairly new thing. So I'm going to give you 7 reasons, or strategies, I should say, why shame is holding you back and how you can create less shame, lift the shame to create more prosperity in your life. People are very reluctant to admit that they're struggling, to admit that they might even be in poverty. They might talk about it more socially, where it's a social problem, a society problem, or more of a global situation, or even a community situation. But very rarely do people express their own struggles with finances. Now, we've all seen situations where there's a GoFundMe or people in the community are rallying up to help someone, but almost always there is a situation connected to it. For instance, someone's house catches on fire and they're raising money for that, or someone is unwell and they're raising money for that. But it's really never that. There's just a family struggling and people are reaching out to help because no one knows that the person's struggling. And honestly, a lot of people are struggling. There are people right now that are watching this video that are having a hard time even providing for their family. Now, in the past, the not so recent past, there was a sense of community and of almost dignity to having poverty, because poverty was not seen as something that was a personal failure or something that should hold you back. In fact, people used to see poverty as a way to gather together and to support each other. And it was something that, like I said, was very dignified. We've turned that into somehow, in some way, we've turned that into something that we should have shame, that we should shun someone who's not doing well. And we like to think that we might be better or making better decisions than the person who might be struggling. And the person who's struggling is probably thinking that very thing, that you think that they are above them. I brought this up in another video, but it used to be that if you were struggling, you made what was called peasant food, food that was from your culture and handed down through generations of people that had to survive. And that was seen as something that was really something to honor and cherish. What it's turned into now is filtered food, of photographs that are filtered of people going out to eat, close-ups of their fancy drinks, and also even takeout right now, really putting a high emphasis on living big and living well. We're supposed to be more enlightened right now. We're supposed to be more awake, more conscious. But what's happening is we're just more aware and awake of the differences in our economics. Even 10 years ago and 20 years ago, we did not have privy to every single vacation photo of our neighbors and our friends and our friends' friends. Now we see everything, and a lot of it is actually built up to make it look like, hey, look at what a great life I have. You don't know if everything is on a credit card or that they are, by the skin of their teeth, maybe losing their home or being kicked out or evicted. You really don't know what's happening in other people's lives. But because we're online a lot, we seem to compare ourselves. So I don't know if we're so much enlightened or we just have a filter over top of what we're looking at as well. And I wouldn't even say it's rose-colored glasses. I would say it's green-colored glasses, where we're envious and we're feeling jealous of what other people have, and we want to recreate it. Now, I'm not saying that's why you might be struggling, and I'm not saying that's why people are in poverty. There are over 34 million people in poverty. Most of those individuals are children. Statistically, 1 in every 6 children are in poverty. And it's not unusual for someone to worry about providing for their child when they know that poverty is actually that prevalent. But I'm going to give you some tips that you can do right now that will help you. Number 1, you have to lift the shame away from your struggle. Lifting the shame away from your struggle helps you to see things more clearly. When you see things more clearly and when you're more aware, you're more based in reality. You're not in that filtered life anymore, or in the superficial life where the things that really don't matter that you've been sucked into because of the internet or because of what your neighbors have, none of that actually matters. What really matters is your peace of mind every day. When you're in that space, you can actually get more easily the help that you need. It might not be all of the help that you need because there's so many people struggling right now, but you can actually see more clearly, you're going to be less stressed, and you'll be able to even create some of the solutions for some of the problems that you have right now that there's so much noise in front of you because you're so stressed, you can't see the answers that might be right in front of you. This is actually a starting point when you can lift the shame. It's not about what you have financially right now. It's about lifting the shame. It doesn't matter where you are financially. You could actually have a lot of money that someone else would be able to live 3 times over with, but you feel like you're struggling. So I'm not even talking about dollar amounts, but there is actual poverty lines. And I will tell you that the poverty lines are ridiculously not right, because there's no way that someone, for instance, a family of 4 could easily live on $25,000 a year, especially if they have to provide their own health care. There's just no way that they can do that with overhead and everything else. So if you're making $18,000, $25,000, $30,000, even $40,000, you might be really struggling right now. So your starting point isn't so much about what you're making, it's about lifting the shame and seeing things more clearly, having that starting point. A lot of us have to move away from personal failing to empowerment. If you have shame, you feel like you are wrong. If you have guilt, you feel like you've done something wrong. And you may have this misconception that if you are in poverty, that you have somehow mishandled your money, or in some way you're just not saving enough, or whatever it is, you feel like you're just not enough. And that whole not enough is exactly the problem. You have to feel like you're deserving. You have to feel like it's not about just specifically you. Yes, there could be some behaviors that do contribute, but there's also a mindset attached to it. And I'm not saying that by waking up tomorrow morning and having this affluent kind of charisma mindset doesn't mean you're going to automatically become more affluent, but you will start to change some of your behaviors and you will start to change how you carry yourself. And more importantly, you're going to look in the mirror and have respect for yourself. You're not going to have that shame or guilt or blame, all of those kind of emotions that are holding you back from living a life that is more happy. Regardless of if you're working right now or not, you might feel some kind of a resentment, not only for the situation with COVID, but also for your work environment. Maybe you were laid off, maybe you can't find a job, maybe you are working in a way right now that you feel is beneath your skill set. And that's probably true, but having a resentment because of that is something that's new. Because in the older days, and when I say older days, not that long ago, just a few decades ago, we had people who definitely were working beneath their skill set, beneath their intellect, but they felt like it was an honest day's work and they felt like they were contributing not only to their families, but to the greater good. And that's the difference, where there was a sense of gratitude and there was a sense of being more empowered. And when you feel more empowered, you just feel differently overall. And even your immune system reacts differently when you feel happier and more empowered. Another thing that's happening that I see a lot more now, when I say a lot more now, definitely over the past year with COVID, but also before that, the last maybe 5 to 7 years, I've been noticing more of this push where poverty is about personal failure or about a community failure, maybe a race or a gender failure. And we need to shift that thinking away, because it's not a personal failure. Just because you may have made some mistakes, and who hasn't, even the affluent make lots of mistakes, it doesn't mean that you deserve what's happening to you. And the moment you think that you deserve it, it starts happening more because you carry yourself differently. You make different types of decisions. You have different behaviors. you respond differently to situations, you compare yourself more, you're just not as happy. So we need to focus more on what is affluence and success to you today, not what it is in your dream. Like, I know you want to be a multimillionaire, I get that. We need to focus more on what is really affluence, what is really being successful. Is it really a certain dollar amount, or is it a state of mind? And is it a certain level of food that you have on the table? Is it the overhead that you have? I'm not saying that I want you to think small, because I know that everyone who is in finance or money mindset, everything is always about thinking big and like just being super affluent. I'm saying, like, what do you need today to be happy? I'm not saying to lower your standards, but I'm saying to look more not just in the future and the hopes and the dreams and the goals. I'm saying, what do you need today to be happy today, to be happy in this moment? We also need to do something that's really important. We need to get rid of the blame and the shame and the self-doubt and the guilt, where you feel like where you are financially is not only a community failing, because you could be looking at what's happening in the world right now and say, like, if this weren't happening, I would be in a better position, which is absolutely true. But there's also still, even without COVID, there's also still another stigma associated with poverty, is that a lot of times these days, people assume that someone who is in poverty just doesn't want to get out of it, that it's learned helplessness if they have some type of support. There is some truth to that. If someone through generations is always getting support and that's all they know, and there isn't anything that's helping them to strive to have more, and now they're just looking at comparing themselves, and now their idea of success is having a certain type of a car or a certain type of a shoe or a certain type of expensive makeup just because it's a name brand. These are the kind of things that people purchase to try to fill themselves up, to try to make themselves feel like they're somebody. Now, I'm not saying that these items are only for those people, but I'm saying that a lot of times that when you see someone who is in poverty, who feels like they're really struggling, but they want to feel like they've made it, they go for some kind of a name brand to show their community that they have something, that they have saved, or they have put something on credit and they have something, and that's a status symbol. But we need to move away from all of that, and we need to look at what would make you really happy today. What would make you feel fulfilled today? Would it be putting food on the table and having a really great meal and spending time with your family? What does success really look like for you? A lot of times when I ask my clients, what does success mean to them? They first start out with a dollar amount or taking care of people, things they want to do for people. But when I keep pressing them, it always comes back to the same thing. They want time to spend with their loved ones without stress. You can learn to enjoy the moment in spite of stress. Stress is always a constant in our lives, and it's how we handle stress, and it's our resilience, which is how we cope with stress, that makes all the difference in the world. And the more we can cope and the more we feel comfortable, the better we're going to be well off. Now, what if you are self-employed? What if you are in a business or you want to be in more of a business? Well, that's where you pick one area. It might be YouTube, it might be Instagram, it might be a podcast, anything that is online, because that is how you're going to reach more people now, especially because we're supposed to be social distancing. So pick one area that you really want to focus on and really just talk about your passion, which is your career, your occupation, and really just focus on helping other people. That's where people are going to get to know you. That's where you're going to set yourself apart. And when you do that, it's going to help you to feel like you're doing something more for the greater good, because that is what our very recent ancestors did. They did a lot to help the greater good, whether it was their own family line or whether it was their community or globally. They did more for others. They didn't always think of themselves. And I know that when you're stressed out and when we're in this crisis that we're in, it's really hard to not think about yourself and your family and the things that you want to do and the things that you're missing out on or that your loved ones are missing out on. But you can turn it around a little bit. I'm not saying it's going to be an overnight thing, and I'm not so naive to think that you're going to start volunteering and you're going to suddenly be more affluent and happy. It's not going to be that easy. But the difference here is I'm not here to sell you a dream. I'm here to help you in your reality. You can have a very magical life enjoying the world around you right now, in spite of the stress and the hardship and everything that you're seeing. Because you know what? You're still alive. You still have options. You still have freedom. You have more than you possibly can imagine within you. You just have to be able to lift the shame, the blame, and the guilt to see it.